Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast is brought to you by Compassion International. For $38 a month, you can help release a child from poverty with food, education, medical care, vocational training, all done in the name of Jesus. For more information, check out compassion.com/sportspectrum. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. Sponsor a child today. Today on the podcast, we welcome Tennessee Titans kicker Ryan Succop to the program. Ryan was selected as Mr. Irrelevant in the 2009 NFL Draft, the last pick, 7th round, number 256, by the Kansas City Chiefs. He played his first 5 seasons with the Chiefs from 2009 to 2013, and then at the end of the 2014 preseason was released. It didn't last long, 1 day to be exact, and on August 30th, released by the Chiefs September 1st, 2014, he officially signed with the Tennessee Titans. In 2018, February of 18, he signed a 5-year contract extension worth $20 million. Pretty good for a kicker who was Mr. Irrelevant. He finished his rookie season with Kansas City, tying an NFL record for highest field goal percentage by a rookie in a season, 86.2% of his field goals made. And he has the NFL record for most consecutive successful field goals from inside 50 yards. He made 56 consecutive field goals inside 50 yards. Ryan played his college ball at South Carolina and now is entrenched and settled in as the kicker. Nothing irrelevant about this guy. Ryan Succop, the Tennessee Titans kicker, had a great conversation with him. I hope you'll enjoy hearing his story of faith and football on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Take a listen. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Good to talk to you, Ryan, and I'm excited. My wife is a diehard Titans fan, so she's a little excited to hear about your journey as well. But you've been doing this kicking thing now. As I'm researching, and I'm remembering when you were drafted, Mr. Irrelevant, right? The last pick, and it was 2009. And now here we are almost a decade later, and you're still doing this kicking thing, and it's been great watching you for the last 10 years and going into year 11 of the NFL as a kicker. Tell me about sort of what life is like right now in the off season. I'm always fascinated because we're taping this in late May. You know, it's the middle of the off season, and you know, you had OTAs and you'll have mini camps and things like that. But just what a routine is like for you as a kicker versus maybe a different position.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The way I always look at it or tell people that ask that question is I say, listen, I'm a lot like a pitcher in baseball. You know, a pitcher doesn't want to go out there and throw year round because if they do, they're going to run into all kind of problems with their shoulder, their elbow, that type of stuff. And so, I'm kind of the same way kicking. I typically shut it down after the season. I'll do a lot of stuff training wise and just staying in good shape, trying to keep my body flexible and strong and that type of stuff. But as far as kicking, a lot of times I won't start kicking, until May or June and then start kind of gearing up for the season from there as far as, actually kicking the ball. But so that's kind of what we're up to right now.
Is it crazy to think that you're going into year 11?
Yeah, it is. I'll never, actually just this past year, the draft being in Nashville, I had the opportunity to go down and actually announce the last pick, the Mr. Irrelevant pick, which is of course where I was picked 10 years ago. Yeah. And it was kind of a surreal feeling just kind of being up there and just really seeing, when I was drafted at that time, I never would have imagined that, I would still be playing this long. But it's been a great journey, and I've been very fortunate to be able to do it for this long.
We had David Pollack on a few weeks ago on the podcast to talk about just a variety of things, including his faith testimony and his journey. But he also worked the NFL draft in Nashville, and he said he's never seen a crowd the way that crowd was in its reception to the NFL draft. And you were there in day 3. I don't know if you were there in day 1 and day 2 as well, but that place, that city loves its football and loves a party, doesn't it?
Yeah, no question. It was really cool. I think everyone here in Nashville, I was really proud of our city, the way that we showed up for that. we have some very passionate fans, and it was cool to see so many people come out. And like you said, even when I was down there, announcing the very last pick of the draft, I didn't think there'd be many people at that point, and it was still packed out. Now, I think it may have helped. I think there might have been a concert or something after that, but it was still, there were a ton of people down there, and it was really cool. Great showing for our city.
Ryan Succop's joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. When you were a kid, and if I told you at, say, 10 or 11 years old that this is where you would be now that you're, 32, almost 33, getting ready to start your 11th season, would you have believed me if I had told you when you were 10, 11 that you'd be an NFL kicker for 11 seasons? Would you believe that?
Yeah, no way, because one, I didn't play football yet. I kind of grew up playing everything except football, to be honest with you. So maybe if you had said baseball or something, I'd say, oh, maybe, but football, okay. No way.
So what were the sports you played as kids, and kind of what was your sports life like as a young boy?
Yeah, I kind of like I said, I kind of played it all except football. I played basketball, baseball, soccer, and golf. Those were kind of my four sports that I loved, and I obviously played those, up until high school, and even most of those in high school. And just had a ball. It was, I grew up in a fairly small town, but had a good group of buddies that we all stayed busy playing sports together, and it was just I had a lot of great memories playing sports, and the life lessons that you learn from it, the friendships that you make, and it was just really, really cool to kind of grow up doing that.
Do you remember your first NFL, or not NFL game? We'll talk about that in a second, but your first football game that you ever played in, and realizing, oh, maybe I like football. Maybe this could be something that I could do, even going into college.
Yeah, I remember it really well because for the longest time in North Carolina, football and soccer are both in the fall. And so my freshman year of high school, my soccer coach kept telling me that summer, he goes, man, you've got to go see if you can kick the football. And I kept telling him, like, no, I don't want to be the kicker. I'm not going to do that. I had basketball and baseball and golf, coming up, in the winter and spring. And I was like, man, I'm busy enough. I'm already playing 4 sports. And finally, he made me go down to practice the week of the first football game. And I went down to my first practice, kind of showed up, kicked the ball a little bit, and the coaches were like, hey, you're suiting up on Friday. And so I was like, all right, cool. I didn't think too much about it. So I showed up to the game Friday night. It was an away game, and I'll never forget going in the locker room, and I have all these pads on, I have all these pads laid out in my locker, and I've never put football pads on a day in my life. And I'm about to play a varsity football game. So I remember having to ask my buddy, like, hey, where do all these things go? And I'm looking for the thigh pads, the knee butt pads, all this stuff. And so I had to get a little help getting dressed. But after that, it went a little bit smoother, and ended up just, really falling in love with it, having a lot of fun doing it. I guess the rest is history.
At what point did the NFL seem like a possibility or a realistic, I don't know if it's a goal or just something that was going to be on the forefront when you're at South Carolina, which is where you chose college, and you were 2-time All ACC in the second team? You were a good kicker in college, but at that point, is the NFL even something that you're still thinking about?
Not at first. I think when you first get to college, like, it just sort of seems so far fetched. And then I think around maybe my sophomore year, I started just kind of seeing other kids that we would play, seeing other teams that we would play. And, that was kind of when I realized that, the Lord had really given me some ability, and that maybe there would be a possibility to pursue that. But still, it wasn't, I had no idea that whether or not I would get that opportunity. But I started thinking about it probably my sophomore year of college. And, obviously from there I was able to continue to work towards it and try to improve and get better each and every year. And, obviously was very fortunate to get that opportunity.
Tell us about your faith. You mentioned the Lord a little bit, but tell us about your walk with the Lord and maybe where it began and kind of how it started to take shape for you as you got older.
Yeah. So, I grew up going to church, and, obviously I always believed in God, but I never really had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ really until I would probably say my first couple of years of college there. That was kind of the first time, for me, some of my peers were inviting me to my teammates were inviting me to a team Bible study that we had, or a team chapel service that we would have. And, for me, that was something that really made an impact. It was a little bit different than, your parents dragging you to church. I mean, I think we're supposed to do that as parents, and the church is very important. But for me, it was kind of neat that my friends were inviting me to something that really made an impact on me. And, I remember also getting into college, and you're you're out of the comforts of your own home. And that was the first time for me where, playing in front of 80,000 people and all this type of stuff, where I realized, like, man, I knew I could do it on my own. And, I heard the verse Philippians 4:6-7, and it's, talking about, don't worry about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to the Lord, and let the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, guard your hearts and your mind in Christ. And every time I would kind of get nervous before a game, and I would start to read that, and I would immediately kind of feel this peace, to be able to go out there and, not worry about a lot of the external stuff. And, that made an impact on my life big time. And from there, I was able to, really to grow closer and closer to the Lord each year. And, man, it's been amazing to see kind of the ways that he has directed my path, and the way that he's blessed just so many different areas of my life.
Go into that a little bit more, because I think there's an outside perception of people maybe who aren't strong believers or have any kind of faith in their life, that when you say something like that, oh, well, then God helped me make that kick, or he helped me, make all of these, baskets. And if you're a basketball player, have all these hits. And that's not really what you mean when you say this piece that was given to you caused you to kind of make all these kicks, I presume, because there's kicks that you miss too. So it doesn't change who God is because you make a kick or miss a kick. But explain a little bit more on what you mean when you say a piece comes over you and it allows you to just kind of play with a different kind of mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I think the piece that I'm talking about is, to me, I have people ask me all the time, like, man, are you not nervous? Like when you're out there, when it's a game winning kick, or you're kicking in front of all these people, like, how are you not nervous? And so for me, I think the world tells us, right? Like the world would say, hey, in that situation, you should have anxiety, or because what happens if you mess up, or what happens if it doesn't go well? Like the world is going to tell us that, hey, we should be anxious in those situations. And for me, the piece that I'm talking about is a piece knowing that, hey, listen, like God does not want me to, he doesn't want me to have anxiety, and he doesn't want me to worry, because if I'm worrying, or if I'm anxious about going out there, then really I'm not trusting him. And that doesn't mean that I'm not trusting him that I'm going to make or miss the kick, but it's just saying that it's bigger than that. I'm going to trust him. Hey, the Lord has me here, whatever the outcome is.
Right.
I know that God is going to guide me through that. And ultimately, as long as I'm seeking him, whether I make the kick or miss the kick, like it's good. You know what I mean? It's going to be just fine. And so, the piece that I'm talking about is just that piece of being able to come to the Lord when you feel that little bit of anxiousness or that little bit of nervousness, and knowing that in him is the peace that transcends all understanding, not the peace that, oh, I made the kick or I missed the kick.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest too. You're in a position and in a role as a football player, but the role that you play as a kicker, where if you have 2 or 3 bad games, it could be out of a job. They might move on that quickly. And that happened to you when you were with Kansas City. Not that you had bad games, but Kansas City let you go on the back end of the 2014 season, just starting in preseason ending. And I wonder, because you're a man of faith at that point too, how did that help you, your faith in kind of dealing with turnover and change, and just suddenly you're without a job? I know it didn't last long, and we'll talk about that in a second, but just the idea of not having a job and working in a place where it truly is the moniker of not for long in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously there can be a lot of turnover, at any position in the NFL, and certainly being a place kicker. And for me, going through that whole experience, I remember I was going into the 2014 season. I had some competition in training camp, and I knew that may be a possibility. That for various number of reasons. There's obviously a lot of sides to football, whether it's the business side or the performance side or whatever. And,
of course.
And so I knew that may be a possibility that I could get released. But going through that, really, when I look back on that, that was like one of the biggest blessings in my life. One, because it was a trial, because it was hard going to practice every day, and, having my wife at home and not knowing, okay, hey, where are we going to be in a couple months, or where are we going to be in a couple weeks? Am I going to have a job? So one, it really made me rely on my faith to be able to kind of get through that. And it made me turn to the Lord even more, which I'm very thankful for. And then, But then on the back end, like actually getting cut, and at the time thinking, man, like this just doesn't, it hurts and it kind of stings, and
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't always feel right, but kind of seeing what God did with that situation. I think the next day I ended up being able to sign with the Titans, and the what He has done. In my life here in Nashville, He's blessed us with two beautiful kids in our time here, and just the friendships that we've made, the teammates that we've been able to be teammates with, and just those relationships is something that man, it just makes me sit back and go, man, I like God was so in charge of that. He was so in control, and even though it wasn't what I wanted at the time, like at the time, no, I didn't want to get cut, but looking back on it, man, what a tremendous blessing it's really been.
And it's ironic. I was talking to you off the air about I'm taking my wife to her first Titans game this year, and it happens to be against the Chiefs. And I didn't realize that until I started talking to you, that those are the two teams, obviously, that you have played for in the NFL. But there's a unique sort of story that took place right after you signed with Tennessee in the first game back, or first game, I should say, as a kicker with the Titans. You faced the Chiefs. Can you share a little bit about what that was like, suddenly going against your old team that quickly, that quick of a turnaround?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I think God definitely has a sense of humor. So I got released by Kansas City the very next day. I signed in Tennessee, and then that week one, we were playing in Kansas City, and man, it was a crazy week because I moved to a new city. I'm trying to get settled in. You're trying to get comfortable with new team, new snapper, new holder, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then, you go play a game against your old team. And, man, it was a wild week. We were able to go in and actually win that game. And I think I had a really good game. I think I maybe hit 4 field goals or something, and we were able to win. And, it was a special moment. And it's been kind of interesting. It seems like every year, a lot of the years we've gone back to Kansas City, and actually probably my most memorable kick of my career, really of my life, was in 2016. We were playing in Kansas City again, and it was 0 degrees. It was the coldest game in Arrowhead history. And I had with I think 4 or 5 seconds left in the game, we lined up for a 53-yard field goal. And to be honest with you, I really didn't even know that I could, I didn't think I could hit from 53 yards when it's 0 degrees, because you just don't get any compression on the ball. The ball
It's just different.
That far.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, it was just one of those God moments. Had the kick of my life, made a 53-yarder to beat my old team, and we won the game in those conditions. And it's just been cool to see what God has done, and it's just one more of those moments where you just sit back and go, man, I could never have imagined this in my wildest dreams, and yet God's got it.
That's awesome. I love that story. Ryan Succop's been our guest here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. There's a unique bond, which I don't think a lot of people realize, with a holder and the guy who's snapping the ball, and a punter, and long snapper, and the kicker. There's a unique bond between those sort of 3 people. And I know you had a unique bond in Kansas City with the guys there, and even now with Tennessee. And it goes beyond football, doesn't it? It's as I'm doing my research, I'm like, wait a minute, are all the guys that have snapped for him and held for him, are they all believers too? And I may be wrong that they're not all believers, but I think there's such a unique bond there. I know Brett Kern is a believer, and he's your punter in Tennessee. Tell me about that dynamic and the unique relationship that you've had with some of these guys.
Yeah, so I've been once again, God has put those people in your life, and he's just been really good to me. When I was in Kansas City, I was with Dustin Colquitt and Thomas Gabbard, who was my snapper and our punter and holder. Both those guys were really strong in their faith, and it really allowed us to be able to be close on and off the field, and push each other and encourage each other. And then I fast forward, I come to Tennessee, and Brett Kern and Bo Brinkley, and Bo's a snapper, Brett's our punter and our holder, and obviously we work really close together. And those guys are super strong in their faith, and we're growing, we're encouraging each other, we're supporting each other. And that's huge, because, what we do, there's going to be ups and downs in what we do. And so if we're, so consumed to just based on performance or whatever, it would be easy for us to, get off track. But, all those guys being so grounded in their faith and being able to push each other is, man, it's awesome. And those are the only guys in 10 years I've had 2 snappers and 2 holders, and we've all been really strong in our faith. And that's something, I mean, just, that's kind of what I was talking about when I was talking about the blessings that I've been with, the friendships and the teammates that I've been able to have here in Tennessee. Bo and Brett are at the top of that list.
That's awesome. I mean, it's such a unique bond too. I don't think a lot of people realize because, there's going to be a bond anyways if you're playing with teammates for many years and you're all sort of involved in everything that you each do. But to be believers as well and to be able to encourage each other, obviously, there's never an isolation of people who aren't believers with people who are on a team. But there's always something unique when you can bond with someone who's like-minded and believes the same and is kind of walking the same walk that you're walking. How has that helped you in your personal journey as a husband and as a dad to be able to have that sort of, just teammates and even some of the mentors and team chaplains and people that can walk you through this as a football player, the resources that you have available to you as a football player to help you in your walk as a man, as a husband, as a dad?
Yeah, it's huge. There's a couple things. One of the things I've always felt so thankful for is that, playing in the NFL, we've had chaplains at the teams that I've been to, and we've had Bible studies, and whether they're player-led or chaplain-led, and we've had chapel services, in hotels, my night before games and stuff. And, I always just think about, not everybody in the world has that opportunity, where they go to work, maybe they don't have a Bible study or maybe they don't have a chaplain. And so I've always thought of that as just a tremendous blessing to be able to have that. And then also, I think about a lot of the teammates that I've sort of had, particularly when I was younger, that I was able to look up to, and men that were strong in the faith, that, raised their families the right way, were great husbands, great fathers, the things that really matter. And, I've been really fortunate on both teams that I've been on to have a lot of men like that. And, that's something that I'm really thankful for. And, you see those older guys doing that when you're a young guy. And then it sort of challenges you. You fast forward to, 10 years later, and now it's like I'm the old dude in the locker room. And, hopefully I can be a bit of an example and encourage some of these young guys coming in. And because ultimately, we know we're not going to remember every game or every score like that, but we're going to remember those friendships and the people that impacted us. So that's kind of the goal.
But there's a responsibility too, right, Ryan, with being a veteran and a guy who's been around to be a mentor. I know there's been some stories in the news of different people, whether it's a quarterback or another position where another guy comes in and they say, I'm not going to mentor that guy because he's trying to take my job. But there is a responsibility, especially not just for a veteran, but for somebody of the faith to be a good mentor and to be a good example and to be able to impart whatever wisdom that they might have to help someone coming up very young in the game. Because you've seen that. It sounds like you had that when you were first coming up. So do you understand and I guess acknowledge and receive that responsibility that is there?
Yeah, no question. As I mentioned, I've had people that have poured into me, teammates and chaplains, and people that have poured into me and encourage me in different ways. And so, I want to be able to do that for other guys. And so that's something that, I'm fortunate to be able to do here in Tennessee. And we have a lot of guys that are able to kind of push and encourage each other. And, it's been really cool to see our locker room really, particularly in the time I've been here. It's, this year, I'm really excited about our team this year. We're doing a little Bible study just Monday mornings right now. And it's real quick. I mean, it's like 15, 20 minutes first thing Monday morning. And we started it just 5 or 6 weeks ago. And every week it's growing and growing. And it's really, really cool just to see guys come in there that maybe hadn't been in there before. It's just really exciting to see what the Lord's doing. And, that's something that, it's exciting to see, it gets you fired up. And, I'm very fortunate to be on a team, where that's going on.
Ryan, it's been great having you on the podcast. Really appreciate your time. Let me ask you our last question here. We ask this to all of our guests on the podcast, and it's always an easy question for me to ask, but sometimes it's not an easy answer. What is the Lord teaching you today? Like right now in the season of life that he has you, you're going into year 11, a husband, a dad. What are you learning from God today? What is he teaching you?
Hey, that's a great question. I would say right now, particularly the older that I've gotten, is just to trust him more and more. So many times I've tried to do something myself, or I've tried to figure something out myself. And every time I do that, it usually doesn't work out well. But when I turn things over to the Lord, even if it's not the answer that I want, at that time, just like we talked about getting cut in Kansas City. I could give you many examples like that. Every time I turn it over to him, it just seems like, man, what a blessing it becomes, whether it's an answer we want, an answer we don't want. But, that's what I'm being taught right now is just trust him.
I love it. He is Ryan Succop, Tennessee Titans kicker. I didn't even ask you this. I'll ask you real quick. Did you know what Mr. Irrelevant was when you were chosen? Had you ever heard of that saying by the time you got drafted? That means the last pick, the final pick in the whole entire draft, and that was you in 2009, 7th round. Did you know what Mr. Irrelevant was when you were picked that time?
No, I knew it was kind of a funny name and something that you probably don't.
It sounds terrible, but it's like, no, but you got picked. That's a good thing, right?
Oh yeah. No, I laugh about it now. It is funny when you think about that name. You're like, man, I don't want to be called that. But
right.
For me, honestly, all along, I was really excited because it gave me an opportunity to do what I love to do. It was a blessing to be drafted, and it's actually been really cool because people kind of remember that. And, I think we kind of pull for the underdog here in America. We like the underdog. And I guess when they give you a name like Mr. Irrelevant, people probably think you're not going to do very much. So,
yeah. Well, you've been anything but irrelevant, Ryan, in your NFL career. If you play 11 seasons or 10 seasons going on your 11th, that's not irrelevant. So congratulations on all your success thus far. Really appreciate you being here on the podcast. And hopefully we'll get to do it again in person sometime in the future. Thanks again.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Thank you for what you're doing, the message you're spreading. It's really, really cool to keep up with you, so we appreciate it.
Many thanks to Ryan Succop from the Tennessee Titans for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Give him a follow over on Twitter at Ryan Succop, RyanSuccop, Ryan Succop. And he's posted an awesome little video recently, within the past month or so, of him kind of holding a football and letting his son, and looks like he's probably 2 years old or so, 3 years old, kicking field goals in his little play area at his house. And it's really fun to watch. And he nails a couple of those field goals just like his dad. So good stuff there from Ryan. Just talking to Ryan gets me pumped up for the 2019 NFL season, just a couple of months away. So really appreciate him for being here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Also want to thank our sponsors, Compassion International. $38 a month. We talk about it all the time. The opportunity to release a child from poverty. We believe in it. We're repeating it. We're telling you about it all the time because it's a powerful way to help release a child from poverty. It's $38 a month. Food, education, medical care, and vocational training. The whole ministry, the most trusted child development ministry in the world, Compassion International, is founded on a principle that is done for Jesus. It's all done in Jesus' name. $38 a month. Make a difference in a child's life by sponsoring them today with Compassion International. Here's the website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and sponsor a child today. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Give us a follow over on our social media pages. Just search Sports Spectrum, where sports and faith collide, and you will find us. Like us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a follow on Twitter. Make sure you retweet and share anything you see out there about our podcast and any of the articles that we're posting. And please share it yourself, and then we'll retweet you, and we'll reply and follow and like all of the stuff that you're posting about Sports Spectrum as well. Also, click that subscribe button on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on so you never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Click that subscribe button and check out our website, sportspectrum.com. Daily articles, devotionals every single day on sports and faith. You'll love it. Every podcast is there as well, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. This is the Sports Spectrum Podcast.